go ahead and get started here. Good morning. My name is Jody Brockman. I am a nurse and one of the Community Health and Wellness Coordinators here at North Kansas City Hospital, Meritas Health. Those of you who have joined us for this presentation today realize that caregiving and caring for a loved one is one of the hardest, but also one of the most important roles you may play. I'm pleased to welcome two dedicated community leaders who will be sharing ways to help guide both you and your loved one to make this process easier. Please join me in welcoming attorney Glen Smith. He is the founder, owner of Lifescape Law and Development, a holistic, multidisciplinary life care planning law firm. After a successful career in the corporate realm, he decided to begin his own practice centered on serving people exclusively in the areas of life care planning, estate, charitable and tax planning, special needs, elder law, and is an accredited VA attorney. Glen genuinely enjoys people. He listens to each person's story and situation to help them develop a plan which best fits their family circumstances and life's values. As a husband, father to 5, and grandfather to 15, Glen understands the confusion that can occur in certain seasons of life. Glen is a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Academy of Special Needs Planners, Life Care Planning Law Firm Association, and Business Network International. He enjoys active participation in local groups, including Northland Professionals in Aging, the Liberty Rotary Club, and is a leader of health ministries at Community Covenant Church of Kearney. Glen earned his master's in divinity at the Nazarene Theological Seminary and his Juris Doctorate at the University of Memphis Cecil C. Humphreys School of Law. I am also pleased to introduce Charley Lewis. In her role as Life Care Coordinator, Charley Lewis is uniquely positioned to champion the cause of our clients with our Life Care Plan services. With nearly 4 decades of experience across a wide spectrum of opportunities, Charley has many years of experience helping families go through the process of life changes. She has worked in senior placement for 35 plus years, along with working in several continuing care retirement communities and some smaller organizations with residents with dementia and Alzheimer's. Charley has lived in Kansas City her entire life. She had the privilege of being raised by her grandparents on their farm until she graduated from William Jewell College. After 15 years in banking, she realized her passion was working with seniors. Charley has 2 beautiful daughters who have blessed her with grandchildren. She has 3 dogs, loves old country music, gardening, reading, and most of all, spending time with her family. Okay, without further ado, here's their presentation, Caregivers' Do's, Don'ts, and Maybes. Please feel free to post questions in the Q&A, and the chat box is also available. Take it away.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Jody, for that introduction. I get embarrassed, and I can't help but snicker every time I hear all that stuff. So my name is Glen Smith, and I have the privilege of being the leader of Lifescape Elder Care Law and Estate Planning. And I am probably the happiest attorney you'll ever meet. My staff, there's I think 10 full-time and a few part-time people. We love what we do, and we love the people we serve. So I come to work every day, and the thing we focus on is life care planning. Now, that's kind of like an umbrella. When I say the word landscape, you know what I'm talking about. It's that the view you see of the land and the different elements, the trees, the rocks, the rivers. Well, we took our name with the concept of we are going to help people with their lifescape, the living, aging process from beginning to end. As a life care planning law firm, our primary objective is to work with aging seniors and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families to help maintain their best desired lives. And we do that through legal services, care coordination, and advocacy. And today we're going to be focusing on caregiving, which we believe is one of the highest callings of a human being, to care for another person during another transition in life. Now, you may be in the midst of being a caregiver. You may be looking at caregiving as something down the road as you anticipate what that's going to look like. And you may be the person that is going to receive the care. What we're going to talk about today is upstream planning. It's where you look upstream of where you are and you determine where you want to go. And then we're going to build a plan. It's kind of like putting in an address in Google Maps, and it gives you directions on different options you can take on arriving at your location. And then you make choices. And we're going to go through kind of a map of the things we believe you should consider while you're in the midst of this. Our bottom line is this: get a plan, work the plan. Let me tell you why I think this is important. I was 9 years old the first time I looked through a steel door with a small window of thick glass, and I saw my mother screaming at the top of her lungs while she was in a straitjacket. Now, leading up to that point was a crazy night where my mother kidnapped my sister and I and drove all night and part of the day until she ran out of gas. There was a lot more to that story, but I wanted to give you the brief version of that. Starting at 9 years old, until I was 56, I was one of the primary caregivers of my mother. And even as an attorney, as a young adult, trying to go through college, trying to start a family, frankly, I was lost. I was overwhelmed. I was mad. I was a lot of things. But what I remember most about that experience is there's got to be a better way. And I knew I wasn't the only person in the midst of it. I could have friends and loved ones that were walking this journey with me, maybe in their own context. But I did walk away saying there's got to be a better way than what we're doing. Part of it is I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know where to go. And this is something that had just been forced upon me and my family without my consent. But I was grateful to be in that position. I also pastored, as Jody no, she didn't say that. I pastored for 19 years. And in the midst of that, working with elderly people in ministry, I saw some of the things that caregivers and people receiving that care experience. So I decided I was going to be part of the better way. And so that gave rise to this movement that we call life care planning. We're fairly unique. Our experiences are fairly unique to this in this area. But as I said, we do legal services. In addition, it's the care coordination and it's advocacy. We are the mama bear that makes sure that whoever we're working with, they're going to get the care they need and want and deserve. And normally, we're working with two people, at least two people. We're working with the individual or individuals in that family unit that need the care. And then second, we are working with the caregivers. Because the way it typically happens is someone, when they first come into my office, it's frequently the family members, the caregivers, and more often than not, they've got what we call their hair is on fire. They're weeping, they're stressed out, there's anxiety. Sometimes I see the cynicism in their voice. I hear the cynicism in their voice. I see it in their eyes and their body language. Oftentimes they've got bad backs. And our approach, and what I want you to understand is you are seen, you are heard, and you are important. And you are part of the people that should receive services yourself, not just the individual that is maybe have the disease or the illness. So what we're doing, what you're doing in your terms of self-help, in terms of putting together a plan, or if you're receiving the help, these are some of the things I think you need to be looking for. You want a place that you're loved and you feel heard and you feel seen and you have a voice. You want to be educated. You want to be equipped, because it's one thing to know something. It's another thing to understand how to implement it. And so that equipping is very, very important. And then you've got to truly analyze what those needs are as you project out upstream. Life care planning, or for caregivers or the people receiving the care, from our perspective, involves 5 elements. First and foremost, it's about health and wellness. Health and wellness. Now, a lot of folks look at attorneys and think we talk about assets and wealth. That's not the approach of life care planning. It shouldn't be, in my view, the most important approach. In fact, I usually tell the heirs when they're HEIRS, I'm from East Tennessee, I speak slang sometimes, but I don't care if the heirs get a dime. It's all about the care, the well-being, the integrity and independence of the individual that is receiving the care. So health and wellness is number 1. Second, the legal stuff. And I think of legal documents and maneuvers, strategies as tools in your tool chest of life. You may never need them. I hope you don't. But the reality is, if you don't have them in your tool chest, you may not be able to complete the project the way you want it. And then we look at the finances. Because as you go through life, as you may figure out on that continuum of care, that's what we call it, as you go from a healthy older person to an unhealthy older person, the price tag goes up as you move along. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to look at housing. Most people we work with want to stay at his home as long as they can. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a constructive way, realistic way? And then finally, and our primary focus today is going to be on support, the family. Those are the 5 areas that I think caregivers and the family structure need to look at as they're coming up with their plan. So life care, caregiving for family members, you got to look at anticipating the needs in the future, coordinating those big moves as you move along, and how to take care of the caregiver as well as the individuals receiving the care. And Glen is sometimes challenged by media, so we'll have to work on this.
I was going to say, I lost you, Glen.
You did?
Yep.
Jody, do you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So about 44.6% of well, that's about the average number of hours. 44.6 hours is what is considered the average work week for a caregiver who is caring for an individual. And that's pretty much full time, because the rest of your life you're generally sleeping. But 84% of those people are always out there trying to get more information. They want to discuss it. But the big issue is dealing with the stress, the anxiety, sometimes the bitterness that can oftentimes come up in the life of a caregiver. Now, where I'm from in East Tennessee, when I was a young child, if you got sick, either your kids moved in with you or you moved in with your kids. That's not the way it is anymore. And remember, I said I'm from East Tennessee. My dad just turned 90. He's in great health. He does 200 knee bends, deep knee bends every day, and he has barbells he's always working. I don't know if I got his genes, but in my world, I'm not in East Tennessee with my dad. And so how does an individual get the care that they need? What we're seeing is a shrinking pool of caregivers for two reasons. One, more and more people are working double incomes. And I'm not being a sexist, I'm just saying the way it is. We've always relied on the daughters or daughter-in-laws. Well, if they're still working, if they've got families, it becomes very difficult. Very, very difficult to do. And number two, we're not young anymore. That growing pool, that pool of young people that do the work is shrinking every day. It's beginning to look a lot like an upside down triangle. So as we, baby boomers, of which I am, as we continue to go through life, that is one of the things we need to consider. How are we going to get the care that we need? Let's see if I can move this. Okay. So being a great caregiver requires a great amount of attention to detail, a considerable amount of compassion and kindness. And one of the words that I found missing here is empathy. Empathy. You don't want to take pity on the individual. Pity is a terrible emotion, at least in my view, to have towards someone that is receiving the care. Empathy, on the other hand, says, I understand. I can feel or sense what you're feeling without being in the same place. You are an individual. You are independent. You are worthy of life and care. So the caregiver is the backbone of this system of taking care of a loved one or an individual. They are the ones that are going to help maintain the freedom of the person receiving the care. And oftentimes they're running the household, which is pretty important. You got to continue to pay the bills and make sure the lights are still on. That process involves pre-planning. And more, we talk about it all the time. I'm like a bad preacher. I'm an evangelist for this one. Talk with the loved one before something happens. Frankly, the majority of the people we see are in crisis mode. They are not proactive, even though we all know there's very few crises when it comes to the aging process. Now, let me explain that. Every statistic that is out there tells us that 70% of everyone that's listening to this presentation today, 70% are going to need some form of long-term care before they get to the other side. And 40% of us are probably going to wind up in skilled care. Now, let me ask you this. If I know I've got a 70% chance of something happening to me that I don't necessarily like, do you think it would be wise to plan for it? Jody told you that I got 5 kids. My wife and I and the other parents of my in-laws, my son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, we spent a lot of time planning for those weddings. We spent a lot of time planning on how to get my kids through college. We spent a lot of time with our kids planning for the birth of their children. And I am surprised at how little time we spend on planning for that, that third era, that third age of our lives, especially after we reach 65. So what we're advocating here is that you put the same amount of time and effort in planning for your own aging process as you may have in your career, the wedding of your kids, the birth of your kids, which I know you've done. And for example, one of the questions that we always ask when we're doing this planning is, what has to happen for you to give up your keys to your car? I want to know that in advance. And we're going to write it down and we're going to ask you to sign it. Because if and when that time comes, we want to be able to show you that this is what you said when you may have been a little bit more lucid and had more executive decision-making power. What has to happen in order for you to move out of your home? The home where you may have lived your entire life or raised your children or had a happy relationship with a spouse or partner. Those are the type things that need to be addressed in the midst of this process of life care planning. And it begins with the conversation. Now, the conversation, that's a whole different seminar, but I'm going to hit some of the highlights here. And as a family unit, our friends, we're going to start with who's the best one to start the conversation. What are the feelings that we have as the caregivers as we approach this subject with our loved one? What are our goals? What's the best outcome? I was reflecting on a biblical story recently where Jesus was confronted by a guy that was blind, and Jesus' question was, what do you want me to do? And a lot of times that's one of the essential questions everyone needs to ask. What is it that we want for this individual? What are our goals? What's the best outcome? These are the questions we have to formulate before we go speak with the individual that needs care. What do we need to do in order to be prepared? That long list, that checklist in those 5 areas that need to be covered in order to function properly and really well and take care of the caregivers. What is the most difficult part of that conversation that we are going to have? Charley, I think you're next up.
Oh, you have this one. I have the one after you.
Oh, sizing it up?
Yep.
What are your loved one's priorities? Now, let me tell you this. I could probably guess what my wife's are. I could probably guess what some of my father's are. But the reality is, my wife and I don't always see eye to eye. And what she's thinking may not be what I'm thinking. And that's what I'm finding with a bunch of children that are trying to set the priorities or life care goals of their parents or loved ones. You need to ask those questions of the loved one and have those written down and documented while they're able to participate in the discussion. What is the level of care that's needed? And so you size up these priorities for the loved ones as well as the caregivers on the front end. So that's what we're talking about, sizing it up, because your priorities may not be my priorities in my life. Charley?
So as Glen mentioned, the slide, a couple slides ago, we talked about who was the best person to manage this process. So we start with who's on first, because it is important to have that point person that understands what has been decided, what the goals are. Also, that person needs to understand that there may be conflicts and not be afraid to talk about those and talk through those. We spend a lot of time talking with families. Sometimes all of the children are in the room and sometimes they don't all agree on different things. So hopefully by the end of those conversations, we understand who is the best person to be the point person for the process. It's beneficial to engage the help of outside facilitators like a social worker or maybe your minister from your church, because they can help give a different perspective. If it's all the same family sitting in the same room, we already kind of pre-guess what somebody might say, and it might not be the right thing. So we try not to anticipate what might be said or how they'll react. We want to be open. We want to kind of be an open book, express the love and concern, but listen intently. So you're understanding what the wishes are of the person that you're going to be caring for and the other caregivers that might be helping you along the way. Your loved one might just say, I don't want to talk about it. That's a very common comment. Or they'll say, well, talk to dad about it. Mom doesn't know, what she wants to do. She'll let dad decide. He makes all the decisions. That's wonderful, but we really need the input of everyone to make sure that we have a cohesive plan and everybody's moving in the right direction. So it's okay to walk away from that and maybe approach it at a different time. The one thing that they have some difficulty talking about is money. Nobody likes to talk about the money. Most parents don't have conversations with the kids about the money. They just take care of things, but they don't really understand the cost of the process that we're getting ready to engage in with the caregiver. It's interesting that oftentimes a caregiver spends half of the money they make on the person that's paying them, because it's like, oh, you're in the store and you see some Twizzlers and it's like, oh, you know what? Mom loves Twizzlers. I'm just going to pick these up. So there's a lot of different things that go along with the dynamics, the spending of the money. And so you do have to have a plan to understand how the process works. We also help with making sure they understand that health insurance, there's different things that insurance will pay for, but there's also different priorities that have to be in place in order for those insurances to cover things. So you want to make sure that you're talking with someone that understands all of those things that are available and the best way to get the help that not only the caregiver needs, but also the person that they're caring for. You might ask the parents to review the bank accounts with you so you understand what kind of finances are available. As we develop the plan, we know, do we have the funds to pay for everything that it's going to require, especially if it's someone with heavy care needs? Or do we need to look at avenues to help get money to help provide what's necessary to cover the potential care needs? And finally, you're going to form your team. It's too big of a job, I promise you, for one person. Trying to do everything yourself leads to burnout. Everybody that's a caregiver, I'm sure at some point has been there, and that's when the red flags fly up. You should form a larger network. Make sure that you have the people that you need helping you and backing you up. And again, it doesn't always have to be family. You have friends, you have a church family possibly, but there's also a lot of resources in the community. And we make sure that you're aware of what is available. And if you need help along the way trying to understand that or what they do, talk about it. Talk about it with your other team members. Make sure that maybe somebody can take the point of finding out what's available out in the community. So utilize the whole team. It's you, Glen, 14.
Well, I want to follow up on this conversation about the team for a moment. I've been practicing law 41 years, and I've got a lot of opinions, and I've got to the point where I share a lot of them. I was sitting in a conversation about 3 weeks ago with a professional, and he was in his 80s, he and his wife, and at the end of the table, there was a young lady who was his daughter, and a gentleman who was the son from, let's say he's from Alaska. And I asked this question of everyone. Mr. So-and-so, if you get sick and don't die and need long-term care, what's your plan? Now, this professional kind of bowed his neck at me a little bit, and he looked at the end of the table and he says, "They're going to take care of me." And I thought for a moment, "There," meaning them, one of them's in Alaska, and the other one's the only female here locally. And the daughter's jaw just dropped. And I thought, how unfair that is for you to impose that expectation on one person who's the only one is going to have boots on the ground without discussing it, number one. My point, not just how rude that was, but number two, as Charlie was saying, it does take a village. And the way I would recommend that you approach it is you start making a list of those tasks that are involved in those 5 areas. And then, kind of like multi-level marketing, you make a list of who do I know? Who could possibly have an interest, either voluntarily or with compensation, be able to come and help us with these tasks. Frankly, oftentimes you need to have boots on the ground, somebody there that's local. But sometimes, like that young man from Alaska, he could do a part of those as well. For example, take care of the finances, pay the checks. The other thing I want to caution caregivers about and family members is avoid using the phrase, "I'd rather do it myself." Frankly, I'm not sure always the motive in saying the words. Maybe it's frustration with the rest of the family, but typically it doesn't end well. I think if the earlier you are in putting together that team, the better you're going to be as you move along. We're going to talk about the 5 steps that we would recommend as you move forward in putting together your plan. Doing these 5 steps early, as opposed to in the crisis mode, adds consistency, and it makes things a lot more comfortable. Step 1, more often than not, people wait for crisis. You don't want to do that. You want to start the conversation. And I can tell you an easy thing to look at. Look at the point of retirement. Usually we're going to suggest to kids and loved ones and individuals that 3 to 4 to 5 years prior to retirement, you need to start having discussions. My wife and I are starting to have these discussions. Or maybe it's when you retire. You start having the discussions about what do you want your life to look like over the next 17 to 20 years. And you start making that roadmap of what you want it to look like upstream, because you know it's coming. 70% chance, you know it's coming. And you're going to look at those 5 areas and you're going to make a plan as you move forward. So start the conversation and avoid allowing someone else to make assumptions about what you want are your priorities. That's kind of the way I look at it. I want to be in control as long as I can. Most of the people we work with, I think that's the same way. Well, if you're a caregiver or anticipated caregiver, you need to approach it early. Step number 2, we've already talked about it, form your team. Now, let me also suggest that team includes all the professionals that your loved one currently have. Almost everybody has a doctor. Nowadays, almost everybody has 3 or 4 or 5 doctors. They need to be part of your team. What we're seeing is people live in isolation. The better healthcare systems that we work with bring these people together as a team, and they communicate between one another. Oftentimes, they've got a CPA or an accountant, a financial advisor. Maybe they have an elder care attorney. Maybe they've got a realtor that they would like to work with. All those people need to be included and more in as you put together that team, because they will have an impact on putting that plan together. Third, put the plan together. Write it down. It needs to be in writing. not just in your brain, so that you can communicate it effectively. And it's a robust plan, right? Robust in that you review it regularly and you update it as you move along the continuum of care. One of the things we find is as people age, our fears increase. And the two main fears are a fear of losing ourselves, losing our identity, losing our autonomy. I believe it is true that the number one human need is autonomy, independence, being able to make decisions for ourselves. And anything that tends to try to go against that makes us become very anxious. The second fear is the fear of being broke, of not having resources, being dependent, being at the whim of someone else, particularly the courts. What we try to do is convince people, and I want to try to convince you today, it is better for you to spend some money today than lots of money later on down the highway. If you spend a little money, a little time doing those things you need to do today, you're going to save a lot of time and money down the road, and you're going to get better care than you would otherwise. Better health, better wellness. So those are the things. Step 3 is to make that plan and start getting your team together. Number 4, find your support. And as we said, one of the things that we hear frequently is, I didn't know. And I get it. I know a lot of things because I've experienced a lot. I've done a lot of work in the area. But most people have had careers as teachers, as homemakers, as nurses like Jody or other people, but you don't know everything in this particular area. So what I found is we need to go out and do some research about what options we have, what resources are available. I can tell you, at least from my experience, and I think Jody could probably confirm this, every major regional hospital has a list of resources that would be available for caregivers. I'm on the board at Mid-America Regional Council called MARC. And we work in the 19 counties surrounding the area trying to prepare for this huge number, growing number of 65 plus baby boomers and how we can better serve them. And there are hundreds of programs that are available that few people know about.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a clearinghouse that I'm aware of. MARC might be one of the best ones from my perspective. So you got to go out and start looking and making your list of what some of the available resources are. And number 5, care for yourself. Now, I have an old saying, it goes like this: you can't give what you don't got. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. If you are diminished in those areas, you cannot deliver the care and the love and the passion and the empathy that you need to give to the person you're caring for. It is very important that you, self-care really is number 1. If you don't have those things, you can't perform properly your duties as a caregiver. So I'm the advocate that as far as the caregivers, you are the number 1 priority, not the other person. Because you need to be physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually fit in order to do your job. So once again, that plan not only is for the individual needing care, but for you as well. Charley, I think you're up.
Yep. So staying along that vein, I'm going to talk a little bit about finding support because we have spent a lot of time talking about how important it is and how it's okay to reach out and get extra support if you need it. In this documentation, there's some areas like the local area agency on aging, That is a great resource. They're very knowledgeable about what's available, of course, in the aging area. Plattsburgh, Clay County, and Ray County all have websites that you can go to that will help you find resources that you're looking for. Also, check into the services offered by your community through the Elder Care Locator, and the website is provided there. It's just www.eldercare.gov. So make sure that you know where the resources are, like Glen mentioned. Most all hospitals have a resource list that they will provide when someone's going home. And then finding support, consulting a professional. As he said, everyone that we work with normally has their own little network. They have their doctors and the nurses, who now all the offices seem to offer a social worker. I have a lot of hospitals call me, their social workers call me and say, hey, I have this client or this patient. We're having a little bit of trouble finding help for something. And then they call me and just ask me what I might know. Maybe I have something on my list that they don't have. So there's a lot of professionals out there that can provide support for you. You just have to be certain to call and ask. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay. As Glen said, you don't know what you don't know. And so when you ask a question and you learn something, that's a bonus. So don't
Charley,
be afraid.
If I might interject at this one, what we're finding is a growing number of people that don't have people.
Yes.
A growing number of people that never had kids, don't like their kids, or they don't have siblings. And that is a reality. So if you're in that category, you are particularly, or should be particularly, motivated to get on this. And this is the reason. There is a growing body of professional fiduciaries, our firm is one of them, that make decisions for people that don't have people, or care for people when they don't have people, or their people are in bango or overseas, because a lot of times you do need those boots on the ground. So let me suggest to you that if you're in that group, either you don't trust the people that are in your lives or you don't have them, there are fiduciaries that can help you. There are public fiduciaries. Every county in Missouri has a public administrator. Frankly, I always try to stay out of court and amongst the court people. But you can also interview and make a list of fiduciaries that can help you if you are in that particular area. Thank you, Charley.
Thank you, Glen. As Glen mentioned, you can find them. You can hire help if you need to hire help. Some home care workers do some housekeeping, some laundry, some shopping. Those agencies offer different time frames. You could hire somebody that you wanted to come maybe just once a week for 2 hours and help with different things that would take a load off of you, so you have some time to yourself, or take care of some things that you can't get to because you're too busy being the caregiver. So there's people out there that can be hired if you need help. It's much like, I don't know how many of you are familiar with a service called respite care, but communities, and I say communities, I don't like the word facility, but there are communities that offer what's called respite care. So say you're a caregiver and you need some support because you would like to go take a vacation or spend some time with your family, or you're just plain worn out and you need some time to regroup. There are facilities, communities in town that you can call, and you can possibly take the person that you're caring for there for a very short period of time. I think they have a minimum of 3 days and a maximum of 30 in most instances. So when you're looking for resources, if that's something, if you are the only one, if you don't have that support group that Glen and I have been speaking of, please know that there are communities out there that can help you along those lines as well, giving you some time to take care of yourself, as we've talked about earlier. Agency on Aging is also very familiar with that information, and they can share that and how to get hold of those. Now, there is a cost associated with that, and most often insurances don't pay for that respite care. That's an out-of-pocket expense, but every situation is different. So you want to make sure we ask all the right questions to see if that respite care could be covered, because in some instances it definitely can be. So that's available too. The main goal is to make sure and help make sure that your loved one stays as independent as possible in their home, but we also have to make sure that it's safe for them, that they're secure, they're safe. You know, we get a lot of folks where when Glen says they come in with their hair on fire, that's because they've been out in the streets all night trying to find dad, who walked out of the house in the middle of the night, and they can't find him and they're in a panic. So while you're doing that caregiving, the security and the safety, and really just the person you're caring for knowing that you're there and you're providing that care and that support. And then in your brain and your team, you're talking about, hey, do we maybe need to put a camera up? If we know that mom's getting up several times in the night, wandering around the house, she might not try to go outside, but there's a lot of things a person can do in a house in the middle of the night all by themselves. So just want to make sure that you find support there too, to make sure that everything is safe. Your local fire department will come out and inspect your home and let you know if they see anything that they feel is unsafe or should be maybe changed up a little bit. There's organizations, social workers, they can do a home assessment. We do home assessments all the time. And you know, the interesting thing, the thing that I find most that I have to say to families is we can't have 17 throw rugs. People trip on throw rugs. And so it's those little things. But again, it's that support system that you have that understands that's their niche. They know what needs to be done, and to ensure the safety and the security for the person you're caregiving for. So that's always a good option too. Lifeline, the personal emergency response system. A lot of people buy lifelines, or I don't know if you buy them or you rent them, but if you think mom's doing okay in her home for 8 hours while you're at work, then you come home and then you're the caregiver in the evening or on the weekends, then you can purchase a lifeline. And if something happens, they push a button, and of course, EMS or however you have it set up, they come in and check on that person because they know they're spending time in their house by themselves. Again, it's safety and security for the person that's alone. They know they can push that button and they can get some assistance, even though you might be out for a period of time taking care of business or working or whatever your day allows. So there is opportunities to get lifelines. And again, there's people that can give you information about that. Platte County, Ray County, all of them. If you go to Clay County, it's actually claycoastseniors.org/lifeline, and you can get information about those lifelines that you might be helpful for you in caregiving. Caregiving at a distance is coordinating care when you don't live in the same community. And Glen spoke of this a little bit, that it's okay to have a team member that doesn't live right in the town. There's a lot of things that they can do to help with caregiving. If it's the financial, everybody seems to now know how to get on their phone and order groceries, and the groceries are delivered directly to the person's home, and you don't have to be local to do those kinds of things. Technology is amazing. It's allowing a lot of people to participate in caregiving that don't live in the same town. So make sure that when you're making up your team, don't discount those folks that don't live in the same town, because there's a lot of things and a lot of different applications and technology out there that allows other people to help with these caregiving and the support of the caregivers. There is also a lot of caregiving support groups. And again, as we mentioned, the hospital has resource lists, and most of their resource lists give listings for caregiving support groups. And I would encourage all of you to go to a support group if you are a full-time, well, not even full-time, if you're a caregiver, because being able to sit in that room and share with people that are in the exact same place or were, or maybe going into that space that you're in, there's a lot of comfort in knowing that you're not really the only one, because you definitely can feel that when you're in the midst of trying to be a caregiver. So caregiver support groups are available in lots of different areas of town, probably some close to where you live, because there are a lot of them. But don't feel guilty about taking time off to go to a support group. Again, I'm sure you can find resources that would allow someone to come, so you could have some time to make sure that you're getting the support and the care that you need to continue to be the best caregiver you can be. Glen.
Well, I want to follow up on the discussion about support groups. Number one, beware the promises you make as a caregiver. Sometimes we make promises such as, I would never put you wherever. I would never allow you to move from your home. I would never allow you to live in a skilled facility or assisted facility. Be careful what you promise, because that oftentimes equals a lot of guilt and worry if you are having grave difficulty in keeping that promise. Number two, what we find is isolation and the lack of community are great consequences of these diseases, and they exacerbate the decline of the individual's mental capacities. Isolation of the caregivers, isolation of those being cared for. Both need community. These support groups are an easy, low-level area of people that are walking the same journey oftentimes, and can provide encouragement, hope, and fellowship. But I want to caution you once again about the necessity for looking ahead and providing regular, qualitative ways of community for both the individual receiving care as well as the individual that's doing the caregiving. This is kind of a legal issue in terms of caregiver agreements, but we find this frequently as being a really good thing to do. And let me talk about a caregiver agreement. It is an agreement. It's a contract whereby whoever the caregivers are individually going to enter into a caregiver agreement, either with the person they're caring for or with their power of attorney. And that agreement very clearly identifies what the role and duties of the caregiver are and what they are not. This is oftentimes essential to providing transparency, particularly in the family system. If there's more than one sibling, or maybe it's blended families, his family, her family, our family, but a caregiver agreement can keep peace in the family. Number two, it provides for accountability as to what's should be done. These caregiver agreements oftentimes require logs to be completed as to what the caregiver is doing. It also avoids presumptions about what individuals should or shouldn't be doing. And that brings me to that next one. These caregiver agreements can be with or without compensation. If an individual is providing regular ongoing care, at least in my view, it makes sense and it seems fair for the caregiver to be compensated for the work they're doing. Oftentimes, because of the caregiving, they're unable to have other jobs. But this is one of the major points. If an individual pays a family member for caregiving without a caregiver agreement, if that individual receiving the care ever wants to get need-based care from Medicaid, the VA, or some other need-based program, that money you've been transferring to your caregiver that's a family member will be presumed to be a gift and will result in that individual being denied care for a period of time. So to overcome that presumption, get a caregiver agreement in place. Some of the programs, and I'll kind of move quickly through this area, is the Aging Mastery Program. And in this region, Mark is the primary license holder and facilitates all of the programs for both the caregivers. There's a caregiver aging mastery program, and there are individuals that are just moving into the retirement that are trying to make this plan for themselves. But I think this is one of the best programs I've ever participated in. I have personally facilitated several of these over the last few years. And if you're interested in one of the best programs that I think you can look into for yourself or as a caregiver, go to the Aging Mastery Program, check out Mark. And these are the 10 areas that the Aging Mastery Program works in. These are the part of the 5 elements, the wheel that we talked about. This is a great program to start putting together your plan for yourself or as a caregiver. And then we have more websites that you can go to in order to find those available services. You can spend a lot of time on that Mark Aging Mastery or Mark Mid-America Regional Council, and I think that would be well worth your effort. Here's some more websites that could be available. And I wanted to leave a little time for conversation. We're coming up on the hour, and sometimes you just need to be pulled from the podium. So, Jody, do we have any questions, or anybody have any questions that we can address at this time?
No, our attendees have been very quiet. I think they're all absorbing all of this information. Gosh, and I am so thankful for all the resource links that you gave us. And thanks also for introducing the services that Mark provides. I'm actually going to be presenting next week at Gladstone Community Center for Mid-America Regional Council. So yeah, they're a wonderful organization.
Great. Good.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share today, and may God bless you, and we look forward to talking with you another time.
Thank you. And do you guys mind if we share your slides if any of our attendees are interested?
Oh, sure. Give them away. Anybody that's interested.
Ellen, make some pocket change. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, thank you again. Wealth of information, and I'm just trying to absorb it all. And I'm just grateful that you guys were willing to participate in and partner with North Kansas City Hospital. This was amazing.
We loved it.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.